Have you ever stopped to think about why fasting has been such a powerful practice throughout the centuries? It's not just about abstaining from food. It's something much deeper, a spiritual key that few truly understand. Some believe fasting is only for times of crisis, but the truth is it can radically transform your life in every aspect. Want to achieve a closer connection with God? Want to discover the purpose He has for you? Fasting is the way to do it. And here's something even more intriguing. When you fast, you're not just renouncing the material. You're opening the door to receive answers you may have been waiting for years. Curious? Then keep reading and discover how fasting can reveal the plan God has specially reserved for you. Fasting, for many, goes beyond simply giving up food. It's an ancient practice embraced by spiritual leaders throughout history to seek clarity and personal growth. Imagine a moment when everything around you feels chaotic. Fasting emerges as a tool to disconnect from the external world and reconnect with the spiritual. It's not about losing something, but gaining the space to hear what God has to say. In this silence, one finds themselves reflecting on their actions and intentions, opening up to new directions. What's interesting is that fasting allows for a kind of reset. Think of everyday life, where we're bombarded with responsibilities and distractions. Fasting offers that moment of pause, where the spiritual takes precedence over the material. A simple example: instead of spending hours on social media, dedicating that time to prayer or reading inspiring texts makes a huge difference. This is the moment when self-awareness blossoms and the answers we seek start to emerge. This practice is also a powerful form of sacrifice, teaching renunciation. When someone chooses to abstain from pleasures like food, the mind is freed to focus on what truly matters: inner growth. Think of people who fasted during crucial moments in their lives. A businessman facing a major decision chooses to fast to seek guidance. He does this not to appear strong in the eyes of others, but to strengthen his relationship with God and find the right direction. Now, what could be more powerful than discovering that this moment of fasting is also a conversation with the divine? You set aside the external world to dive into the depths of your soul and allow a greater purpose to reveal itself. And this leads us to the journey of self-awareness, a tool everyone should explore more frequently. Fasting isn't just about abstaining from food. It's a journey of renunciation from earthly pleasures to make room for the divine. When someone deprives themselves of something, the goal isn't the sacrifice itself, but the opportunity to hear God's voice more clearly. In times of crisis, this practice becomes even more essential because it's in the silence that answers emerge. Many are surprised to realize how fasting reveals truths that, amid the chaos of daily life, would have gone unnoticed. Additionally, fasting allows for a deep reconnection with one's inner self. Without the distractions of everyday life, the mind turns to the issues that truly matter. Imagine yourself in a crisis where nothing seems to make sense. Fasting, combined with prayer, brings an inexplicable peace. The feeling of hearing a divine yes is something only those who experience this practice can understand. It's in this space of renunciation that the answers you were searching for begin to reveal themselves, as if the path finally becomes illuminated. In practical terms, fasting can be a pause to reflect on what is truly blocking your spiritual growth. If you feel lost, perhaps it's time to let go of small pleasures to hear God's voice. An example: instead of indulging in a lavish lunch, why not spend time in meditation, seeking clarity on an important matter? You'll find that self-awareness becomes more accessible in this space of reflection. And this is how fasting and self-awareness walk hand in hand. It's not just about giving up but gaining. Each meal not consumed is an opportunity to feed the soul with divine insights. By focusing inward, you prepare for something greater, something far beyond material sacrifices. And when we speak of the biblical foundation, everything begins to make even more sense. Fasting is deeply rooted in Scripture, practiced by prophets and disciples over generations. The Bible offers countless examples of leaders who fasted during pivotal moments. Zechariah, for instance, used fasting as a way of purification and to call upon God's presence in times of difficulty. Matthew, in his Gospel, highlights how Jesus fasted for 40 days in the desert, spiritually preparing himself for his mission. These moments weren't simple abstentions, but powerful connections with the divine. In Scripture, fasting and prayer always go hand in hand as fundamental tools for those seeking true spiritual transformation. It's fascinating to observe how fasting always precedes great revelations or important decisions. The person practicing biblical fasting places their faith before their physical needs, fully trusting that God will provide. In this way, fasting is not seen as deprivation, but as an investment in the relationship with the Creator. Fasting in the Bible is also frequently portrayed as an act of humility before God. When someone decides to fast, they acknowledge their total dependence on the divine, something that great leaders have always understood. A practical example would be a pastor who, before making a crucial decision for his congregation, dedicates himself to fasting and prayer. He isn't just seeking an answer, but a deeper connection with God's will, ensuring his choice aligns with divine purposes. What makes the biblical foundation of fasting so inspiring is the clarity it offers about the power of renunciation in pursuit of something greater. It's no wonder so many passages emphasize the importance of this practice. And just as a lumberjack needs to sharpen his axe before cutting down a tree, fasting sharpens us spiritually for the challenges ahead. Fasting is often compared to the work of a lumberjack who needs to pause to sharpen his axe before continuing his task. In everyday life, we run from one place to another without giving our soul time to breathe. This is where fasting comes in, as a strategic pause to realign our spiritual focus. When we stop and reflect, like the lumberjack sharpening his axe, we become stronger to face life's challenges. Without this pause, we wear out, and our spiritual efficiency diminishes. Fasting is that pause, where we choose to turn off the external noise to focus on what really matters, our connection with God. Think about how daily activities pull us away from our focus. Distractions, worries, and even temporary pleasures distance us from the true source of peace. By practicing fasting, the person creates space for the divine presence to take center stage in their thoughts, something essential in times of crisis or when major decisions need to be made. This metaphor of the lumberjack goes beyond simple illustration. It teaches us that spiritual rest is necessary for a balanced life. A practical example would be someone who, feeling overwhelmed at work or home, dedicates a day to fasting and meditation. This act isn't just a form of recovery, but also strengthening, preparing for future challenges in a more centered and spiritual way. Fasting gives us this vital pause to sharpen our inner axe. By focusing on the spiritual, one also learns to value what really matters. During fasting, we realize that many of the things that worry us daily are fleeting and superficial. Just as the lumberjack must sharpen his axe to continue, we need this time of reflection to move forward with greater clarity. And this leads us to an even deeper point: the lessons fasting brings about placing spiritual needs above physical ones. Fasting teaches a powerful lesson. Spiritual needs should always come before physical ones. In a world where immediacy reigns, fasting emerges as a countercurrent, inviting us to slow down and reflect on what truly matters. When someone decides to fast, it's as if they're declaring that the desire to please God is greater than the urge to satisfy the body. It's a lesson in discipline that few understand, but it transforms the lives of those who practice it. During fasting, the mind undergoes a sort of reconfiguration. What once seemed essential, like food, suddenly loses its importance compared to the desire to connect more deeply with the divine. Imagine someone starting to fast to overcome a moment of crisis. As the days go by, this person realizes that the true hunger is not of the body but of the soul. They discover that their spirit was longing for something the material world could never offer. Fasting also brings a lesson about how our daily choices shape our spiritual journey. By choosing to renounce the physical, we choose to nourish the spiritual, something that has a direct impact on our lives. A practical example would be someone who, while fasting, decides to use their free time to read biblical passages or meditate on scriptures. This simple act of replacing a meal with moments of reflection can completely change how the person sees their priorities. And so, fasting reminds us that there's much more at stake than just the body. It leads us to a place of deep reflection, where every spiritual choice resonates in our lives. This process is ongoing, always challenging us to place God above everything. But what happens when this practice becomes a constant in our lives? It leads to an even deeper understanding of the power of spiritual discipline and the transformation it brings. Now that you've understood the transformative power of fasting, what's stopping you from starting this practice today? How would your life look if you had the clarity and peace you've been seeking? Fasting is more than renunciation. It's an opportunity to connect with something greater, to open yourself up to God's plan for you. What will your first fasting decision be? How will you apply this knowledge to change your spiritual journey? If you want to keep learning and transforming your life with these powerful practices, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. That way, you won't miss any content that can help you grow spiritually.